Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of RevTalks. Today we're joined with Paul over at Big Advisors. How's it going today, Paul?
Going great. Good day so far.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being here. Can you give the audience some background about Big Advisors and which space you guys are operating in and what you guys actually do?
Sure. So Big Advisors, a friend of mine who I've entrepreneured with a lot. We've created a couple of different businesses over time. He sold his second multi-location, multi-million-dollar business and decided to just retire. And then his wife said, I'm disappointed in you. And he says, I can handle angry wife. I can't handle disappointed wife. So she said, why? She said, I expected you to help more people. While he was building his first multi-location, multi-million-dollar business, he was the lead professor in the MBA program at Lindenwood University and ended up funding the DRE Center for Entrepreneurship, where I'm also a participant. So he started then looking at doing consulting and helping people, joined the largest small business consulting firm in the nation and realized pretty quickly that their model wasn't actually about helping people. It was actually about extracting as much money as you could from people, which was counter to his mission in life, right? So he started talking to a couple of us about starting not a consulting business, but an advisory business, just so we could differentiate. So what we do is we help small businesses, particularly in the trades, to move from just surviving to thriving. We can usually double a business's income, net income, through all kinds of different ways, but we focus on 5 areas. So leadership, sales, operation, finance, and culture. So most consultants focus on the middle 3, sales, operation, and finance. But we believe that you've got to fix the leadership and you have to fix the culture. So we help install a culture of high accountability through weekly, what we call BAM meetings, big accountability meetings. And so we work through what are called burning issues. So issues in the business where either they're not getting what they should be getting out of the business, or they have a problem that's stopping them from getting what they should be getting out of the business. So it's a matter of helping them change their mentality about how they approach their business, how they think about problems and solutions. So we focus on trades businesses primarily in the 2 to 5 million, 2 to 10 years old. 2 to 10 million, and 2 to 10 years old. But we also help a lot of businesses getting themselves ready to exit, whether that means transferring to other family members or selling the business outright or working out some kind of employee buyout. We help them maximize their value by getting their company and moving. Most small businesses operate as a tax advantage business, but you can only sell for the maximum if you change that to a profit maximized business, not a tax advantage business. So that's the other area we help in.
Okay. And I know you did mention to helping companies move through specific growth stages so they can eventually sell. Just out of curiosity, what are the main problems you see actually pop up at that stage? Is it mainly leadership to where certain positions have to be implemented in the actual business? Or do you see that there's a lot of actual IP and software that has to be built to increase the enterprise value? Or what do you see most actually happen with those specific businesses at that stage?
Yeah, ultimately, I'm an old software guy and I like to solve problems with software. I originally learned to code to solve my own problem as a global sales manager. But the reality is it's people, right? Almost every business, it's people. And in most businesses, the number one thing we see is what we call the founder trap. They keep all the decision making, they keep all the information, and it doesn't matter if it's a software business or a carpentry business or a bricklaying business or HVAC, that leader has to empower their team to be able to make the decisions that need to be made. So they need to give them that authority and that responsibility and then hold them accountable, right? And then those managers need to do the same, right? They need to have people that work for them, whether it's a crew leader, a team lead, or a lead developer, or a UX UI person. They all need to have a focus on having their team accountable. So the first thing we do when we come into a company is we do what we call a big check 360. So we talk to everybody in the business. It's called 360 because it's like the old 360 personnel review, right? Talking to everybody all around. So we go in and we interview everyone, and it's amazing how many burning issues, things that are right, troubles in the business or missed opportunities in the business, we can unearth in one day. We can usually unearth anywhere from, rarely is it 10, it's usually 25 to 30. Then the challenge is working with the team to put together processes so they can attack those in a priority list that makes the most sense, right? And so we start with, we're about to write a book. We both have published books. That's my book called Entrepreneur Means Do, but we're working on a new book called Q2R, Quick to Revenue. So our focus when we do a Big Check 360 and then we start implementing the big plan is focusing on those things that will generate the quick revenue, right? Slow revenue builds a business value over time, but you've got to have the quick revenue to have the cash flow to actually invest in those longer term initiatives.
And what do you specifically see that really increases the value of a company other than the actual headcount of people, and then also the empowerment of specific positions, getting away from the founder-led trap? Because one thing is for sure, especially in HVAC businesses and more, home improvement businesses, need a lot of people sort of to be able to service the jobs, go out there, give estimates. And so the founder, it's super important for them to get away from that. But at the same time, even in kind of the software space, if you're building a lower ticket software as a service, on the internet, it's typically easier to kind of just stay in that founder-led trap because, obviously you can build a software, it has infinite amounts of ceiling. You can sell it multiple times, very repeatable. Obviously, businesses like to purchase those types of companies. What do you kind of see as something that is typically a trend among these different companies?
Yeah, and I've run and co-founded a bunch of software as a service businesses, moved to that model in 1998 with our AI-based biometric company. But the reality is, whether it's software or somebody's hammering nails, or somebody's putting HVAC unit right on the house, it's all the same problem. And that is systems, right? So sales, operation, and finance. Most small businesses we come into, no matter what kind of business it is, we just talked to a software business recently. They had really very little idea about their finances. And the CEO did not have any clear indicators, any KPIs, or even any tracking of what their revenue was, what their costs were, and what their cash flow looked like, right? Because you can be extremely profitable and still go out of business because you lack cash flow, right? So we focus first on cash flow, and I developed an app called Big Cash Flow, right? And because cash flow is king. If you don't have cash flow, you don't have anything to invest in the business. And ultimately, if you keep borrowing money, or in the software world, my friends out in Silicon Valley, we just kept raising money. But at some point, we had to turn to where we actually had cash flow, profits enough to have cash flow. And, it's that scaling of those three areas of systems: sales, operation, and finance. So most small businesses don't have their financial act together. Most small businesses, and especially in the software area, they don't have SOPs. They just trust that programmers are going to do what they do, but they have no way to measure. When I first started, there were software shops that counted lines of code you created in a day, right? And then that went in the garbage really quickly when we moved to object-oriented programming, because the goal was, how could you do the same thing instead of in 1,000 lines of code, in 20 lines of code, right? So the metrics have to really reflect the reality of the business on the operation side. And I'm simplifying, in HVAC or that kind of stuff. You got to have trucks, you got to have, and those trucks have to have the right equipment. They have to be kitted out. Somebody can't get to a job and then do 3 Home Depot runs, right? There goes your profit. But the same thing's true in software. If that developer doesn't have what they need, or doesn't understand what other people in the other teams are doing, they can't be effective, right? So operations is critical. And then you get to leadership, right? And that whole idea of accountability, people, they think they will be uncomfortable if they have an atmosphere of accountability. But if it's really a true atmosphere of accountability, it's very empowering, because then the high performers obviously get the psychic reward and the recognition of their performance. And managing sales forces, I can tell you, if you let the bottom and you concentrate on the bottom in the sales force, your top performers are going to be very unhappy and stop being your top performers, right? Because they think it doesn't matter whether I'm a top performer or not. Because there's the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That there's certain needs you have and then those stack. But Hertzberg, a guy who came later, said, interesting, but a need is only a need until it's satisfied. And that doesn't become, it's not a motivator anymore. It becomes a maintainer. And that's really true with high performers, right? We work with a plumbing company and most of their guys were happy to knock off at 3 p.m. and didn't want to take overtime. Well, they can't be a 24/7 plumbing company if only one of their guys takes any calls after hours, right? So it's that supportive, but yet an accountability atmosphere that rewards the top performers and obviously makes it clear to the bottom performers that they need to improve, right? And you don't have to micromanage to do that. They can then self-manage at that point if you have the right systems.
Exactly. Definitely SOPs and systems to be able to continuously follow specific framework is what really is going to actually scale a business. And lastly, too, at what stage did you say, again, do companies actually approach you guys as a firm to be able to actually get some help to scale to the next level?
Yeah, generally it's a company that's kind of plateaued. So the plumbing company I was talking about, when they acquired the company, it was about $1.5 million a year. They grew it to $3.5 million, but the last 5 or 6 years, they've been bouncing around $3.5 million, right? And we identified all those issues I just brought up, right? The CEO, who was supposed to be the CEO, but had no access to the finances. So number one, it's like trying to fly a plane blind. You're going to hit a mountain sooner or later, right? You can't do that. That was one thing. Two, operationally, he was in the field more than he was in the office. And they wanted more jobs and they thought they needed more leads. Once we did the interviews, we found out that they were turning away 30 to 40% of the leads. Just not doing it because what I related earlier about these guys not wanting to work past 3 o'clock. And the dispatchers didn't trust that those guys had the skills to do the average calls. And it's like, wow, so why are they even employed, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
For a truck, you're paying this person, they're taking the slot of someone who could be doing all that work, but they didn't have any systems to monitor what was happening in the company, right? So think of in terms of, driving a stagecoach and you got ropes, right? If you have rope on one horse, but not the others, you're going to go in a circle, right? You've got to have, as a CEO, you've got to have all 3 of those areas under your control in the sense of you need to be aware and have indicators as to how things are going, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then once again, Paul, where on the internet can we find you? What is the actual company website? And then what is your LinkedIn too for the audience?
Yeah, bigadvisors.com. My LinkedIn is Paul Heirendt, PaulHeirendt. It's pronounced easier than it looks like, just Heirendt.
Perfect.
Unless you're in Germany and it sounds something guttural like Heirendt.
Appreciate you being here, Paul, and I hope you have a great rest of your day as well.
Great. Thank you very much.